Good afternoon, I'm Dion Devow, Indigenous Engagement Specialist at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. We're here today talking with Benjamin Sylvester Millar, who's an Aboriginal First Nations man, Aboriginal man, and is currently studying to become a computer scientist, which is quite rare when we're talking about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their participation within the IT industry. Ben currently also tutors in Python for other undergraduates and students within the ANU and in Canberra itself, and has also currently done an internship with Google. We're going to be speaking with him today about his journey and the struggles, the triumphs, but also just a little bit about his story, and just would really like to do that around trying to promote this particular course of study and a profession for other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the country. Our research has shown that there isn't a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in this particular field of study, and one of the reasons that we're doing this is to try and promote and increase that by hearing and sharing our stories, the stories that we know from people that are like Ben, that are doing this incredibly valuable work. Ben, how are you going? And thanks for being with us here today.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Dion. No worries.
That's good. Do you want to start by just letting us know? Obviously, I've said you're a First Nations man. You're a proud Aboriginal person.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about where you're from, your country, where you grew up? I think you grew up here in Canberra, but where's your country and who are your people?
Yeah, definitely. So I actually grew up. So originally, my people are Woolly people. So up from around Yeppoon Way, north, kind of like central Queensland area. I grew up southeast Queensland, just south of Brisbane there. So my nan originally came down on that side. So my mother's side's Indigenous, father's white. So they came down that side. And then, always grown up there with all my aunties and uncles. Don't get to go back country very often up near Yeppoon Way, which is unfortunate. But and then I originally moved down to Canberra for uni, just after finishing grade 12.
Yeah, right. So, and just in relation to that, like going to university, we're talking today about, increasing the participation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples within this, IT in general. Computer science is not something that's really standard when we're talking about First Nations peoples. Yeah. What was kind of your inspiration, or what made you kind of, even become interested in, studying this particular field? Or striving towards working in this profession?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So probably one of the hardest things about studying, just to start with, was like moving away from home. And I feel like that's a big barrier to lots of Indigenous people studying anything.
Yep.
I'm a single mother. She took care of me like my whole life kind of growing up. So moving away was like really tough for the both of us to start with, obviously. Obviously families helped her out a lot, but the main thing that kind of is actually, I didn't start by studying computer science. I started by studying like biology and biotech. I was really into science at school.
Yeah.
I was one of 6 people in my IT class at school though. It was tiny. And the main thing that kind of got me into, computer science or tech in general was my teacher. I was really fortunate to have an awesome teacher in high school who was pushing really content for like first and second year uni in year 11 and 12, which I hated him for at the time. But, since then I've realized that was like amazing for him to do that. And his kind of passion, I suppose, was something that's kind of driven me onto that.
Yeah, and just in relation to your degree, like most Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, they're kind of more driven or more attracted to social sciences, degrees that are like health related, teaching, law. We've got a lot of doctors. We don't have many accountants. And going back to, again, you being, studying towards becoming a computer scientist is quite rare. Have you tailored your degree anyway so that there is kind of like a social science or some sort of way that you're able to use your degree, so that's not just technical, but that you're able to do something in community as well?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I have to be careful how I answer this because most of my aunties are nurses, so I can't say that. I'll get in trouble.
It's not a bad thing.
But no, so I think lots of people gravitate straight towards healthcare and law and those kind of policy and like directly influencing positions because, it's pretty obvious what the impact is. You train to be a nurse, you can go into a community and help people or help, blackfellas in general, like taking care of them.
Yes.
You go into law, you can go and, fight, land right battles or
Yes.
whatever it is.
Yep.
The idea of like tech is more like abstract. Like it's not something you think of like, oh, obviously he's going to go and make a computer there. Like that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So my nan was, God bless her, she's not with us anymore, but when she was one of the biggest kind of proponents of education out of everyone I've ever met. So she was always like, I don't care what you do, you're finishing year 12 and you're going and studying. She's willing to sacrifice everything and have parents sacrifice everything to go and educate themselves. And she didn't care what it was about.
Yeah.
So it was a good thing to start with. It wasn't, you're going to go into, health or something like that. It's like, you're just going to learn about the world and everything and go from there.
Yeah, it's probably a good way of kind of giving advice around, not being so specific in terms of a profession. And like when we're thinking about what you're doing, so you're going to be an architect. Is that right?
Kind of, yeah, like a cloud architect. That's what I'm thinking.
So to have that particular skill set is like, you probably need to be, good lateral thinker, be a good communicator. A lot of our First Peoples have those skills and attributes, but I think, there's not been really kind of there's a bit of a disconnect there around being able to utilize those skills and go and work into a profession like the one that you're pursuing. Would you say that that's correct? And how can we, as a people, kind of, encourage more of our mob to understand that we have the aptitude and the skills to be able to do that? I mean, your journey is probably being quite lonely in that, there's not a lot of other blackfellas doing what you're doing. How can we encourage, our youths into the future, or even other mob that just maybe want to try something different?
Yeah, definitely.
To kind of steer more towards, a degree in computer science or...
Yeah, so I reckon, I think most people, when they think about kind of computer science or stuff in general, they think about it in a really abstract, nerdy way. So it's sitting in front of a keyboard typing. Yeah. It's not really. It's finding data and using data to kind of make choices. And every choice that, whether it's policy or government or, anything has to do with data. So it's about ways we can try and, I think, make the data and how it's presented to people friendly to like Black Australia. Because at the moment, everyone who's working on it and working with it is, they're mostly white, really.
Yeah.
So on the lateral thinking question as well, I think, and just communication in general, I obviously grew up in like quite a close community of aunties and uncles and cousins, family in general. And I think that kind of close-knit atmosphere growing up really helps with free-flowing communication, kind of thinking on your feet. I'm the second youngest cousin, so I used to have a real rough time.
Yeah.
But so it kind of helps with, thinking quick and around that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. Ben, what sorts of struggles have you had personally? I mean, besides being, a minority within a minority around your study and your journey towards this, awesome career, which I might add, it is. What are some of the struggles that you've had being a blackfella in this particular field of study and all this discipline? Yeah,
so I'm pretty lucky compared to some other people, I think. So at ANU, where I study, there's an Indigenous centre there, Jabal Centre. Most unis, although they have Indigenous centres, some I'm a bit biased. I think Jabal's the best, but that's a really useful community to be a part of. Unfortunately, out of, there's not that many blackfellas that study at ANU to start with, so there's maybe 30 or so that come into the centre on a regular basis. Yeah. Out of those, there's about 2 which do anything, STEM related, really. Like technology and engineering related, I should say. Yeah, right. So like you said before, it's lots of healthcare work and law and arts is much more prevalent there. But on the personal challenges front, I feel like, especially in a place like a uni or a campus, it's not as kind of blatant and on the nose as it can be other places. Like, I'm not going to be walking anywhere and have something like, shouted at me or something like that. Yeah. But it kind of presents itself in other ways, I'd say. So any issue that has to do with anything to do with Indigenous Australia or policy or anything, I'm expected to be like an authority on it. Right. So always, what's your opinion? And then everyone's opinion is kind of, ingrained, like kind of takes into account what I say about that. Yeah. Such a huge amount of pressure. Yeah, it is. Because I'm like, I don't know them. Like, what am I meant to do? And then there's the other side of things as well, which I know I get, as opposed to some other people would get more blatant racism. What I get more so is, you know, because, you know, my dad's white and, you know, the family has like some money from that side, which is why I was lucky enough, you know, I had a car so I could come down here.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, you know, that and you got a bit of money. You're not really Aboriginal, you know, you're not like a proper Aboriginal.
Yeah.
Which is, it hurts to hear a lot.
It's really offensive.
But what people are coming from is they mean like, oh, you don't live, you know, on country, you're doing stuff for yourself, and that makes you not a real Aboriginal. Like it's really upsetting to hear.
I think that's the misconceptions and the stereotypical kind of ways that people think about what Aboriginal people look like. You know, even when we're talking about skin color or where you're from, or being an authority on every single Aboriginal language or country in the nation. When that's just it's not the case. But that obviously doesn't make it any easier for you around being away from home and dealing with that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of, they point at other people. It's like, you're not as dark as him. You don't sound like him. You don't have his accent. You don't, it's always. Yeah.
But again, going back to, your journey, it's like that old saying, you can't be what you can't see. And I think that you're an excellent example of what we need to see other young Aboriginal people doing into the future. Do you have any advice for people that might see this interview and think, he's a deadly blackfellow, I might want to be like him one day, Can you give any pointers or any kind of advice around if they're at school, how they might be able to access that? Is there like you had a favourite teacher, what might be some of the things that they do to pursue a career along this path as you've done?
It's so tricky to crack it into in the first place, because there's such a stigma around it, It's always, oh no, smart people go and code. It's not true. It's a creative thing to be doing. So it's just a matter of, it's just like another language, right? So if you were trying to learn, I don't know, like Mandarin or something, you'd just sit down and have a book or a website and practice at it. So it's about getting rid of the stigma around it being a nerdy, like ridiculous, very hard thing to do. That's not saying it's like super easy. It takes effort, but you just got to sit down and start doing something. But I think to be able to start doing something you need access to the internet, and you need access to a computer to actually write stuff on. So as long as you have access to those resources to start with, it's about kind of sitting down, putting aside some time and thinking, I want to do this. Why? Because I want to, do well for myself and, make changes in what's becoming more like a technology motivated world, I suppose, or like driven. Every decision is based off it. So I want to be a part of that. So I think I should go away and, try and learn, Python, do some like random stuff in that. And then from then, you just got to apply for everything.
Yeah. So
I put out everything for like every scholarship and every uni or whatever. And it doesn't matter if you get knocked back, you're going to get knocked back from everything.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I think it's an interesting point though, when you're talking about like Python being a language and a lot of our mobs speaking more than one language.
Yeah, exactly.
Some Aboriginal people speak more than 5 languages, some up to 9 actually, in places in the Northern Territory and Queensland. And I think that's another way, I think, of being able to encourage our people to do that by seeing, Python and these types of technical things as a language, so that you can kind of break down what you're saying too, is kind of breaking down those, stereotypes about what IT is also. Like that we need to kind of be more informed about how we, promote that as a profession, but we have to make people understand that it is accessible, that we can do it, and that it's relatable to them and us as a people. Around your, going back to your study again and the opportunities that this degree is going to bring to you, there's lots of cadetships, there's kind of internships around the place. Like I said earlier, you worked with Google, which is a pretty cool, you're probably the only blackfellow that's ever done that. But is there those sorts of opportunities that come about? Is it easier for you to apply for something in an organisation where there's already some sort of program that's specifically around, introducing and encouraging Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people to apply?
Yeah, no, that's easy. Great question. So actually, I'm not the only black person at Google, which is really exciting.
Oh, really? Oh, that's good.
There was one other software engineer who was working there.
Yeah, right.
Who was Indigenous. She's a woman as well, which is incredible. So she's really had it cut out for her. But having that mentor in there was awesome as well. But on the application front, I think it can be kind of difficult sometimes, because obviously having that kind of entry pathway when, things can be a bit trickier sometimes. Like you don't have that kind of, so some people I know, so some of my friends from uni as well, they may not, so some of them blatantly, there's nepotism obviously, where parents or whatever get jobs, but there's more of a subtle form of nepotism in the sense that like, oh, I just had my mum read my essay on the weekend, or
Yeah, right.
oh, my dad just proofread my code. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, I don't have access to that.
Yes.
And just because I'm doing maybe slightly worse in a subject, or I don't have the time to maybe polish that job application as much. Like, I know people who just submit their CVs to like their parents who work in HR, for instance.
Yeah.
I don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
So the idea of having these entry pathways is really critical, I think. Obviously, they're not about meeting quotas and lowering standards to meet the quotas. It's about giving kind of Black Australia an opportunity to go into that. It's hard, obviously, with a lot of the stigma that can come with that, though. I feel like more stigma comes out of, oh, he went through the diversity pathway, than, oh, no, his dad kind of worked there as a partner and got in that way.
And I think that's a good point, because it's like, a good friend of mine once said that we're born with Aboriginal people, First Nations people, Indigenous Australians, however you want to describe us, that we're born with a huge amount of inherited responsibility, but we don't inherit money, and a lot of the times we don't inherit those, family members that have professions in IT or as a doctor, or and within those professions and those families, they have networks, and that's what you've been talking about. And so that makes it easier for your children and your grandchildren, or your nieces or nephews, because you've got this network of professionals that you can tap into, whereas we don't have that. We're still kind of building that, and when it comes to IT, we're even further down the track. So I think your point around us really being able to access organisations like Google or other corporates, and the development of their, in-house specific Indigenous pathways for us are really, really important.
They are. Yeah, it's a mental block as well, really, because I know some people, they see an application, they're like, oh, especially if no one in your family's done it, you don't know anyone that's done it beforehand. You're like, oh, it's not for me.
Yeah.
Whereas if there's a label on it, it's like, hey, this space is open to an Aboriginal man or woman to come in and do this.
Yeah.
That's like, oh my God, that's for me. I can, try that. And it's a sense of drive, I suppose, you get from it. So like, I can be there, I can do that.
Yeah. And so what, can I ask, Ben, what's next for you? Like, you're doing your honours currently.
Yep.
After you finish that, are there any organisations that you're looking at, trying to get some work with at the moment, or what is there a kind of longer term plan? What do you got on the horizon?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I've put out quite a few applications because I want a job. Although the idea of studying more is also really tempting to me. Like, I've enjoyed my education quite a bit, and I'd like to continue it. Although I also would like a bit of money, so it's kind of idea of, do I go and study? Because I'm in a position as well where I'd like to go and study, but sometimes I feel somewhat obligated to go out and earn a wage so I can help support people at home as well, which is a big kind of limiting factor. It makes choice in plays a part in lots of the choices I make, because you want to be able to pitch in at home and help out, so you feel sometimes like you should go out and earn something so you can contribute and help.
Yeah, but that's an important thing, and that's a really cultural thing, going back to what I said earlier around our cultural responsibility. It's like, from the time I was able to earn money, I've always sent money home to my parents, and you've done the same thing. And that's something that non-Indigenous Australia might not understand, but it's a part of our way and our culture, and that adds to the pressure and the responsibility that we have when we're trying to reach for the stars or do whatever it is that we want to do when it comes to education or a career.
Or even letting your hair down, I think, sorry to butt in, but I remember my first kind of year at uni, because I went to college at ANU as well, living on campus.
Yeah, right.
The head of the Jabal Centre, the Indigenous Centre at uni, came up to me first day, because they were helping me pay for my ACOM there, said to me, look, if you go out drinking with all the other college people and you screw up, and you do something wrong, like, I don't know, whether it's something stupid when you've had a few, it's not going to be, college person screws up or ANU student screws up. It's going to be front line of the paper, Indigenous or Aboriginal students at ANU cause, violence or, vandalism or anything. It's going to be targeted, and you're representing that population there.
That's exactly right. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it is especially in an organisation or an institution like the ANU, which has been for many years one of the best universities in the country, and has quite a high ranking worldwide also. There is that prestige attached to it, and so when you're there, you're not just a student. You're not just representing or trying to build a career for yourself. You're representing your family. You're representing our people, and you're representing the Aboriginal community here. And again, that goes back to placing more, pressure on you to try to reach your goals. So, and I think that's what lots of non-Indigenous young people don't really have. Maybe some from other cultures do, but for the most part, I think that it's kind of very individualistic, and they can do whatever they want to do, and they're young and single and having fun, but they don't really have those cultural pressures. They don't really have those societal kind of pressures either when it comes to community and representing us as a people. So congratulations for what you're doing. And I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, but I think you're an awesome example of what can be achieved, and you're an awesome ambassador for Aboriginal people, and also other young Australians, not just blackfellas, but for everybody. So it's been really nice to speak to you, and I just wish you all the best into the future, and we look forward to what you do, for what's coming up next.
Hopefully,
thanks, Ben.
Probably nab me something.
Yeah,
Thanks. Appreciate it, man.